Over the last 5 to 6 years, a business partner and I built a real estate portfolio of about $24 million worth of assets, and about $8 million of that was equity. At the same time, I built a private portfolio for my family and I of about $6 to $7 million, and about $2 million of that was equity. And one of the main tools that I used in order to build up these multi-million-dollar portfolios was second position notes. So in today's video, I'm going to explain what a second position note is and how to use it and what to be aware of and how it helped me become a multimillionaire. My name is Shiloh Lundahl and you are watching the Improved channel focused on real estate investing. First off, one of the things that I should say is, I know I've been wearing a lot of my Bigger Pockets hats and shirts in a lot of these last videos, but I don't work for Bigger Pockets. I've just gone to several of their conferences because I was on a podcast several years ago and it was great. And from that podcast, a lot of people have reached out to me. And truthfully, that really helped me build my company. So that's why I'm talking about it today. So even though I don't work for Bigger Pockets, I definitely like Bigger Pockets. It's a website that has well over 1 million members, and you can go onto the website and you can learn about real estate investing, and you can comment on people's posts and you can ask questions. And it's been a really big benefit to me, both in learning, but then also in connecting. So I just want to give them a shout out because today's video is about second position notes, and I have attracted a lot of people that have lent to me and have gotten second position notes on my properties through Bigger Pockets. So let's talk about that. What is a second position note? Well, when you go and you buy a property, if you're buying it in cash, then there's no note, there's no promissory note. You just own that property in cash. When a lot of people go to buy real estate, they usually get a loan in order to buy the real estate. Whether they go to a bank or whether they go to a hard money lender or whether they go to a private money lender. Some people buy properties just from the cash that they have, but as my real estate coach told me, that if you do that, you will eventually run out of cash. So most people eventually will use leverage or other people's money in order to buy real estate, in order to grow a portfolio. So when you go and get a mortgage on that property, whether it's from a bank, whether it's from a hard money lender or a private money lender, they get what's called a promissory note. And that promissory note is the agreement that you have with them in order to repay the loan that they're giving you. And that promissory note is in what's called first position. What that means is this: even though you own the property and it's deeded in your name, the person in first position has a right to that property if you were to not pay them back, which means that they can take the property and they can sell it in order to recoup their money. So the house is collateral for the loan, which means that if you don't pay them back, they're able to foreclose and take the house and sell it in order to recoup the money that they lent you. So that's a lesson that's really important, that's taught about in the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. If you lend money to someone, it's really important that they can give you something that has value greater than the amount of money that they've lent to you, so that you can take that item and you can sell it in order to get your money back. It's important that whatever they're collateralizing, whether it's a house or something else, it's important that that item has greater value than the money which was lent, because oftentimes there are sales costs and things like that. And so if I lent somebody $100,000 to buy a house that's worth $100,000 and they stop paying me, well, then I may take that $100,000 house back. But when I go to sell it, I need to pay realtor fees, closing costs, and other holding costs. And so I may only be able to get maybe $85,000 to $90,000 for this $100,000 that I have lent to this person. So most lenders that are wise don't lend 100% of the cost of real estate or some other type of item, because they want to be able to recoup all of their money. So they will usually lend less than the value of the real estate or whatever item that's being collateralized. So I've been a real estate investor since 2010, and at that time I had only purchased one rental property. And then I started listening to Dave Ramsey, and Dave Ramsey talked about getting out of debt and the snowball and all of these things. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to work really hard on getting out of debt and saving money and things like that. And so back in 2010 is when I bought my first property, but then I didn't buy another property until the end of 2014. And as I look back on it, I wish that I had known then what I know now with regard to real estate investing, because those were some fantastic years that I could have bought so many properties if I had known then what I know now. So yeah, I'm sad, I lament, but as the saying goes, when is the best time to plant a tree? And the answer is 20 years ago. And then the second half of the saying goes, when is the next best time to plant a tree? And the answer is today. So yes, I missed out on investing from 2011 to 2014, but I made it up from 2017 until today. So if you haven't started investing, you may want to consider starting sooner rather than later. Anyway, to get back to the story, so in 2014, I started again to invest in real estate, and I purchased the building that you see here in the background. This is my therapy practice office, and I purchased this building, and it had 12 offices in it, and then I rented out to other therapists that work here in Mesa, Arizona. And after I purchased the building, I reached out to my buddy who had helped me buy that first rental back in 2010, and I asked him if he had any deals that he was doing because I kind of wanted to start to get into real estate. My wife and I had just had our fourth child, and we were watching a lot of the fix and flip shows at that time while my wife was up late with the baby. And so her and I would just stay up late and we'd watch these shows, and we thought, wow, you know what, maybe we could do this. So we thought we could do it, and I reached out to my buddy and I said, hey, can we do a deal together? And he said that he had a deal that he was just putting together and that he would allow me to be the money lender on it. And at that time, I had opened up a large line of credit on the home that we had, so I had some money available. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and use this money in order to fund this deal. And then hopefully through this process, I'll learn how to flip properties. So he and I did that deal, and it's a crazy story. It's a funny story. In fact, I have a video on it that you can watch if you'd like to. I'll put it in the description below, but this is the thumbnail right here. Anyway, that deal was kind of crazy, but it worked out well. And my buddy made like $40,000 or $45,000 on the deal, and I made $13,000 on that deal. And what that deal really taught me was I can make money in real estate. And so from that deal, which was the very beginning of 2015, I flipped 3 properties that year. And the first one, as I said, I made $13,000 on. The next one I lost like $5,000 on, and I did that one on my own, and I made a bunch of mistakes, and I learned a lot from all of those mistakes. And sometimes in real estate investing, you'll have properties that don't go well, that may cost you money, but if you learn along the way, then that experience may pay you in dividends. And then my third property I did with another partner, and I made like, I don't know, $7,000 or $9,000 on that one, but it also took like 6 months. And so the cost of my capital may have made it to where I really didn't earn a whole lot on that third one. But then in 2016, my buddy and I decided that we were going to start flipping properties together. And that year we flipped like 6 or 7 properties together. And we made about $95,000 each among the 6 or 7 properties that we flipped. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. It was amazing to me that I could earn that much money above what I was making as a therapist. And I thought to myself, you know what? This real estate thing can really create a lot of wealth. However, what we were noticing is that the margins were getting smaller and smaller and smaller on flips. And so because the margins were getting so small, it didn't make a lot of sense to continue to flip, because if you put a ton of work in and you were only getting $5,000 to $10,000 from a flip, well, that's a lot of risk for very little reward. So at that time, my buddy Jason and I went to a training here in Phoenix on lease options taught by John Burley. And John Burley is in the Phoenix area, and he teaches a lot about lease options, and he has his method of teaching it and doing it, and his method has worked really, really well for him. And so we went to that training and we learned a lot, and we took a lot of what he was saying and we meshed it with some of the things that we were doing. So in his training, he teaches you to buy properties with an investor. The investor will get the loan, and then you manage the property and you guys split the cash flow. But we didn't necessarily want to bring investors in on these deals and share a lot of the profits with them. We wanted to actually own these properties ourselves. So that's one thing that we did a little bit different than his model. So what we would do is we would buy these properties under market value, and then we would fix them up, and then we would refinance them. And so this is the basic BRRRR strategy that Brandon Turner would talk about all the time when he was the host of Bigger Pockets. And then David Green, who's now the host, wrote a book about the BRRRR strategy. And this strategy is great when it comes to how to scale a real estate portfolio. But there's one problem with it. And this problem makes it very difficult for people to be able to scale a real estate portfolio. But here's the problem with the BRRRR strategy. When you buy a property, let's say the property should be worth $200,000, but you were able to get it for $100,000. And you put maybe $60,000 into fixing it up. And so when all was said and done, you were into the property about $160,000, and the property was worth $200,000. So you made $40,000 worth of equity. But then when we would go to the bank in order to get the property refinanced, the bank was willing to give us a loan, but the parameters of the loan made it difficult for us to not leave money into the deal. So the bank would either give us a loan for 70% of the value of the property. So if we bought it for 100 and put 60 into it and the property was worth 200, they would give us a loan for 70% of the 200 value. So they would give us a loan for $140,000, making it so that we would have to leave $20,000 plus whatever the closing costs were into the deal. Or they would give us an 80% loan on what we bought the property for plus what we rehabbed it for. So if our all-in was $160,000, they would only give us 80% of the $160 value, which would be $128,000. And then they would say this, we'll give you the loan for whichever is less. So that would make it so that we're leaving $32,000 plus whatever closing costs were into the deal. And when you do that once or twice, that's fine. You're leaving money into the deals. And as long as you have money that you can do that with, that's fine. However, it makes it very difficult to scale if you're leaving $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in every deal that you buy, unless you start out with hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we didn't start out with that amount of money at the beginning. In fact, I had about $200,000 of cash from my home equity line, and then through a program that I did, I've been able to increase my credit lines to about $800,000 at that time. But those credit lines were 0% interest for a time period, but then I have to pay them back. And others weren't 0% interest. And so I needed to be really careful with how I used this money to make sure that I didn't over leverage myself and to make sure that we could handle the payments. So even though I had those credit lines, I didn't always use all of those credit lines. And I definitely didn't want to leave $40,000 into every deal, and then when those credit lines became due, not have the money to pay them back. Because when creditors want their money back and you don't give them their money back, then they're able to take your interest rate from here and put it way up here. So I was really wise in making sure that I didn't over leverage myself and in being mindful of the dates that things were due. So we had been able to get about 17 properties in 2017, and we were refinancing them, but we had to leave, chunks of money into all of these properties. And so it got to a point where we really couldn't grow anymore. So we had a ton of equity in these properties because remember, if the value was 200 and we bought it for 100 and we put 60 into it and they only gave us an 80% loan on the 160, so we were only leveraged 128,000 on a $200,000 home, that was less than 65%. And so it was really hard for us to continue to grow. So one day, as I was networking with another person that I'd met through BiggerPockets, I was sitting down with them and we were talking about, what was going on in his business and my real estate business and some of the challenges that I was having and growing. And he said, well, why don't you just get somebody to do a second position note? I'm like, well, what's a second position note? And he said, well, it's where you have the first loan from the bank and then you network with other people. And if you have a lot of equity in a property, and if they want a return on their money, like let's say they had maybe 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 that was just sitting in the bank and they weren't making any money on it, then they may want to put that money somewhere that will give them a better return than they were getting from the bank. And so if you have a property that has a lot of equity, then you can talk with them and see if they want to lend you that money, and you can put a deed of trust on that property, which would be in second position to the bank's loan. And so you would have the bank loan would be in first position, their loan would then be in second position, and you would need to make sure that there was still enough equity to help the person in second position feel comfortable being in second position. So let me explain this as a word of caution. When it comes to a second position note, you want to be careful because the bank will have a first position. Like let's say the bank had the position of $128,000. And I wanted to bring in somebody in second position because I wanted to leverage the property up to 80%. And leveraging it up to 80% would bring it from 128,000 all the way up to 160,000, which means that I would get a loan for $32,000 on this property. But there would still be $40,000 worth of equity in the property. So that property would have to drop below 20% for the value of the property to be less than the total leverage. So this is what we did in order to build our real estate companies. I started to network with a bunch of people, and I would start holding meetups at my office, and I would go to other people's meetups, and I would go and meet people for lunch, and I would share with them what we were doing with real estate and how we were building our portfolio. And a lot of the people that I was talking with were either people that I had met through Bigger Pockets or these meetups or other sources. They would get excited to hear about all of the things that I was doing, and they would ask if there's something that they could do in order to get involved. And I would tell them, yes, you know what, in fact, if you want to lend to me on one of my deals, then I will show you how I'm doing it from start to finish. I'll add you to my WhatsApp group, which is an investor WhatsApp group, where we will highlight some of the deals that we're doing and we'll answer questions and everything like that. So they started to get excited about this idea of learning how to do real estate as well. So I would create these second position notes on my properties. And a lot of these second position notes might be like $10,000 or $20,000 or sometimes $30,000. And the goal was to be able to leverage my properties up to about 80%, because I wanted them to feel comfortable lending to me, and I wanted to make sure that there was enough equity in there for us, and in case the market were to go down, they would still be protected. So they would lend to us, and then we would give them a return on their money. And sometimes the return was 10%, sometimes it was 11, sometimes it was 12. Then after we had done it for a couple of years, then those rates came down a little bit to 8%, 9%, or 10%. And so we would need to pay them out of the cash flow of the properties. And so that would take the cash flow and it would bring it down quite a bit. So we weren't cash flowing a whole lot on these properties, but at the same time, I was still a therapist and my practice was paying for all of my living expenses. And my partner was still a realtor and he was helping people sell houses and buy houses. And so he was able to live off of his commissions as a realtor. And so when we built our company, we actually didn't take any money out of the company for the first 4 to 5 years. So we were able to take all of the cash flow and all of the money that the company was generating and put it back into the company in order to grow the company. And so one thing I would share with you is if you want to build a real estate portfolio, then plan on not taking any money out of the business for several years. Just reinvest that money. And so you're going to have to do something in order to pay your own personal bills, and don't take money out of the company in order to do that. So anyway, that was one of the ways that we were able to raise money for our company in order to help our company continue to grow. And then in 2018, we were able to grow from 17 properties up to about 81 properties. And then in 2019, we grew it to a little over 100. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we went from 100 all the way up to 200. And then in 21 and 22, we went up to 250. And then about mid 22, we started to sell off several of the properties. And since then, my business partner and I have divided the company. He kept a lot of the North Carolina properties. I kept a lot of the Arizona properties, and we kept our mobile home parks together. So as of the beginning of 2024, we have about 100 units in mobile home parks. And then I have about 40 to 50 single family homes and this office building that I have. And so that's where my portfolio is now. But I just want to say one last thing before we end the video, and that's this. When it comes to growing, you want to be very wise, because you never know when there's going to be a pandemic, and you never know if that pandemic is going to work well for you or if it's not going to work well for you. So it's important to keep enough money in reserves. I know I mentioned that we leveraged our properties up to 80%, and it was during a time of growth and it worked out well. However, if the market had dropped really drastically, that would have been really bad for us. So you want to be wise, you want to be careful as you do scale, because you don't want your growth to be your demise. In fact, it reminds me of the analogy of the peach tree. Several years ago, when we bought our first home, my wife and I went and we bought a peach tree. And it was a brand new tree, and we went and we planted it in the yard. And this was just a little peach tree. The trunk was like, I don't know, less than the size of a quarter. And it was growing and growing and growing, and there was all of these branches. And within the first year, we started to see all of these buds, and from the buds grew all of these peaches. And it was really exciting. I don't know if you've ever planted anything, but if you have and they start to grow, it's like, wow, this is awesome. I'm going to get fruit from my own tree. And it's really exciting. So I would go out there and I would see all of these little peaches as they started to grow, and they were green at the time, then they started to get bigger and change colors. And it was really exciting. The only problem was this: the branches that were going up right at the very beginning, as more and more peaches were growing on them, these branches started to hang down and hang down and hang down. And all of a sudden I realized one day that if I allow these peaches to continue to grow, what's going to happen is the weight of the peaches are going to break the branches. And then I was going to lose all of the peaches. And so I actually had to take off these peaches that were half grown, and I had to throw them away. Not all of them, I just had to take off some of them so that the branches wouldn't break and make it so that I lost all of the peaches.
Peaches finally grew, and now I have to remove them.
This is a painful but necessary part of growing stone fruit.
Just on this one branch, there are dozens of little peaches.
If I let them all get big, they'll just break the branch. It's painful, but remove peaches until you have about 1 every 6 inches or so.
I remove the smaller ones first, leaving the most mature on the tree so I get peaches sooner.
And that's very true when it comes to real estate. You have to be wise, you have to be careful. Make sure that your growth doesn't exceed what you can support. Make sure you have enough money in reserves in order to weather the storms. Lastly, if you are considering being in second position on a property, make sure a couple of things first. Find out, one, what is the track record of the person that you are investing with? Does that person have a really good track record? 2, what is the property that you're lending on? How good of a property is it? What are the comparables in the area? Does the person who told you how much the property was going to be worth when they're done, did they give you the correct value? Or are they just hoping that the value would get there? And third, find out how much money the person has that you're lending to. Because I don't want to lend somebody $10,000 if that $10,000 is going to be their only $10,000. So one thing that we did is we had all of these open lines of credit. We also had some of our own reserves. And having our reserves and our open lines of credit, we still would get second position notes because it made us feel really good knowing that we had our own cash. If something were to go down, we would be able to pull from our own cash and we were able to take care of it. And we would be able to service some of these loans from the cash that we had. So it made it so that we had enough to weather the storms. So again, if you're considering lending in second position, find out who's the person that I'm lending to, what's their track record, how well do they do as a real estate investor. Second, take a good look at the property, find out what the realistic ARV is, that's after repair value, find out what the first position note is, find out how much equity is going to be there over and above your position, and I would say make sure that you don't lend any more than, I'd say, 75%, 80% being the limit of what the value is or what the value is going to be. In fact, that's the limit for a lot of hard money lenders. They don't want to be more than 70, possibly 75% of what the value is. And lastly, make sure that the person that you're lending to has enough in reserves so that if things don't go well, they're able to pay you back. And also make sure you get the proper documentation. Make sure you have a promissory note and make sure you get a deed of trust filed with the county that will protect your interest. Because if you don't get a deed of trust filed with the county, then when the person goes to sell the property, if you don't have a deed on it, then the title company or the lawyer that's going to look at the title work is not going to see that you have an interest in that property. And so that property may sell and you may not get paid. So make sure you get a deed of trust recorded on that property. So hopefully this video was helpful for you. In all honesty, this is one of the biggest things that helped us grow our real estate portfolio. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the description below. I might make a new video for you specifically. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, of course, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, do all that good stuff. I'd appreciate it. And as always, I hope that you have a fantastic day investing in real estate.